The silver light of artificial stars painted Kale Wren's face as he gazed upward through the ice dome. Those distant, manufactured constellations weren't natural, but they were the only stars his daughter had ever known. The corporate megastructures orbiting Arcturus 7 cast their cold blue glow across the frozen landscape, providing just enough light and warmth to make the mining outpost habitable, if you could call this living. Kale pulled his thermal coat tighter as he made his way through the cramped ice tunnels of Sector 12, nodding to the few miners he passed. Most avoided his eyes. Former security officers weren't popular among the working class, even those who'd been cast aside like him. 5 years since HelioCorp had reassigned him to this desolate outpost, and the whispers still followed. "Papa!" A small voice echoed through the crystalline corridor, followed by the patter of tiny feet in thermal boots. Lyra's face appeared around the corner, her cheeks flushed with excitement, despite the perpetual chill. Kale's stern expression melted instantly. "Hey, little star." He knelt to catch her as she launched herself into his arms. At 8 years old, Lyra was small for her age, but her spirit burned bright enough to warm the endless winter of Arcturus 7. "Look what I found!" She opened her palm to reveal a shard of blue-tinted ice that seemed to pulse with inner light. "It glows when I hold it. See?" Kale frowned slightly. The crystal fragment indeed appeared to respond to her touch, growing brighter as her small fingers curled around it. "Where did you find this?" "Lyra. In the deep tunnels, where the miners don't go." Her eyes widened at his expression. "I know I'm not supposed to go there, but I heard the singing." "Singing?" Kale took the crystal, noting how it dimmed in his grasp. "The ice sings. Papa, don't you hear it?" Kale was about to respond when the facility's alert system blared to life, bathing the ice tunnels in pulsing red light. The automated voice cut through the sudden silence. "Attention all personnel. Electromagnetic storm approaching. Security Protocol 7Y14 initiated. All non-essential personnel report to Central Hub for evacuation assessment." Lyra's small hand gripped his tightly. "Papa!" Kale's security training kicked in instantly. "It's okay. Little star, just a storm." But even as he spoke, unease crawled up his spine. Protocol 7 wasn't standard evacuation procedure. It was corporate speak for asset protection priority. The company would save what it valued most, and on Arcturus 7, that meant the helium-3 deposits and the extraction equipment, not the people. "Come on," he said, lifting Lyra into his arms. "We need to get to the hub." The central hub was chaos when they arrived. Workers crowded the space, their faces tense under the harsh emergency lighting. Kyle recognized the corporate uniforms of the executive board, gathered in a tight circle near the communications array. Among them stood Arlex Vaughn, HelioCorp's regional director, his tall frame and silver-streaked hair unmistakable even at a distance. Kale had history with Vaughn, unpleasant history. Before his reassignment, Kale had been investigating resource allocation discrepancies that all led back to Vaughn's private accounts. The investigation had been shut down abruptly, and Kale had found himself exiled to Arcturus 7 with a young daughter to raise in the most inhospitable environment in the quadrant. "Wren." The voice cut through Kale's thoughts. Sienna Vale, chief of operations, approached with quick, efficient strides. Her dark eyes flicked to Lyra, then back to him. "The storm's a bad one. Electromagnetic discharge levels off the charts. We're losing communications with the orbital network." "What's the evacuation plan?" Kyle asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. Sienna's expression confirmed his fears. "Limited transport capacity. The board is implementing value preservation protocols." Her voice dropped. "You know what that means. They can't just leave people behind." Kyle hissed, though he knew very well they could. They would. "Papa." Lyra tugged at his sleeve, her voice small against the din of the crowd. "What's happening?" Before he could answer, the facility shuddered violently. Lights flickered, and for a moment, the artificial gravity wavered. The crowd's murmurs turned to shouts of fear. Arlex Vaughn's voice cut through the chaos as he addressed the gathered workers through the amplification system. "The electromagnetic storm has accelerated beyond predictions. Our orbital network is experiencing critical failures. We must evacuate essential personnel and assets immediately." Essential personnel. Kyle knew what that category excluded. His arms tightened around Lyra. "The primary transport vessels will depart in 30 minutes. Vaughn continued. "Report to your section supervisors for assignment." His cold gaze swept the room, pausing momentarily on Kyle and Lyra before moving on. Cale pushed through the crowd toward Sienna, who was already turning away. "Vale, my daughter needs to be on that transport." Sienna's expression was guarded. "I don't make those decisions. Ren, take it up with the board. You know damn well they won't listen to me." Cale stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She's a child. Sienna." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of the line being crossed. "I'll see what I can do," she said finally. "But make contingency plans. Kyle, this isn't looking good." As Sienna walked away, Lyra tugged at his hand. "Are we leaving, Papa?" Cale knelt beside her, forcing a reassuring smile. "We might have to take separate ships, little star. But if that happens, I'll find you. No matter what. Do you understand?" Lyra nodded solemnly, her eyes wide with a comprehension beyond her years. "Like in the story? The one about the lost explorers who followed the stars home?" "Just like that." Kyle pulled her close, breathing in the clean scent of her hair. "I will always find you." The next hours passed in a blur of preparations and increasing tension. The facility's systems deteriorated as the electromagnetic storm intensified. Communications with the orbital network became sporadic, then failed entirely. The artificial stars above, HelioCorp's pride and joy, the network of satellites that made life possible on this frozen moon, began to flicker ominously. Cale watched the evacuation assignments populate on the central terminal with growing dread. His name was nowhere to be found. Neither was Lyra's. He was preparing to confront Vaughn directly when Sienna appeared at his side. "Sub-Level 3, Dock 4, she said without preamble, pressing a security pass into his hand. "For Lyra only. It leaves in 20 minutes. It's the best I could do." Cale stared at the pass. "What about—" "You're not on the list. Cale." Sienna's expression was carefully blank. "I tried. The board was explicit. Former security officers with disciplinary records are classified as non-essential liability assets." The corporate terminology made his blood boil. "So I'm just supposed to send my daughter alone?" "There will be medical staff on board. She'll be cared for until you can join her on a secondary transport." Sienna wouldn't meet his eyes, which told Kyle everything he needed to know about the likelihood of those secondary transports. "Thank you," he said stiffly, pocketing the pass. It wasn't Sienna's fault. She was just another cog in HelioCorp's machine, slightly more polished, but ultimately as expendable as the rest of them. He found Lyra where he'd left her, in the small alcove near the medical bay, clutching her meager belongings in a standard-issue pack. Her face brightened when she saw him. "Are we going now, Papa?" Cale knelt beside her, choosing his words carefully. "You're going to take a special ship, Little Star. I'll follow on the next one." The light in her eyes dimmed. "But you said we shouldn't separate." "Sometimes plans change." He forced confidence into his voice. "The ship will take you somewhere safe, and I'll come find you. I promise. But how will you find me if we're not together? Cale pointed upward, toward the ice dome and the artificial stars beyond. See those stars? They're actually satellites. Each one is connected to all the others in a network, and that network will lead me to you. I'll follow our stars. Lyra, always. She didn't look convinced, but nodded bravely. I'll wait for you. That's my brave girl. He hugged her tightly, fighting the fear that this might be their last embrace. Now, let's get you to your ship. Sublevel 3 was quieter than the main hub, reserved for corporate operations and high-value cargo transport. Kyle used Sienna's security pass to access Dock 4. Lyra's small hand clutched in his. The medical transport vessel was already being loaded, primarily with equipment rather than patients. A harried-looking medical officer checked Lyra's pass. Child evacuee, the officer noted, scanning the code. She'll be in Cryopod 7. He gestured toward the ship's interior without looking up from his tablet. Cryopod? Cale's grip on Lyra's hand tightened. She's not injured or ill. She doesn't need cryostasis. The officer finally looked up, impatience clear in his expression. Standard procedure for non-essential evacuees on medical transport. Conserves life support resources. His gaze softened slightly at Lyra's frightened face. It's perfectly safe. She'll sleep through the journey and wake up at the destination. Before Cale could protest further, a new voice interrupted. Is there a problem here? Arlex Vaughn approached, flanked by 2 security officers. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the dock's harsh lighting. Director Vaughn, Cale acknowledged stiffly. I was just seeing my daughter off. Vaughn's pale eyes assessed the situation with cold efficiency. Ah, yes, the Wren child. He consulted his own tablet. Medical evacuation, Cryopod 7. His gaze shifted to Kyle. You understand, of course, that resources are limited. Children without specialized skills or corporate family connections are an unfortunate burden during crisis situations. The calculated cruelty of the statement struck Cale like a physical blow. She's 8 years old. Indeed. Vaughn's smile didn't reach his eyes. And thanks to HelioCorp's generosity, she'll have the opportunity to become 9, assuming, of course, you don't delay the evacuation schedule further. He gestured to one of the security officers. Please escort Mr. Wren's daughter to her cryopod. We depart in 10 minutes. Cale felt Lyra's grip tighten painfully on his hand. Her eyes were wide with fear. Papa, no! The security officer stepped forward, reaching for Lyra. Kyle moved instinctively, placing himself between them. I'll take her. Vaughn considered him for a moment, then nodded curtly. Very well. Officer Chen will accompany you. Do make it quick. Wren, the storm waits for no one. The interior of the medical transport was sterile and efficient, like everything HelioCorp produced. The cryopod section was located at the rear, a row of clear chambers designed to sustain life in suspended animation. Most were empty, awaiting the wounded or sick who would never arrive. Cryopod 7 stood open, its systems already humming in preparation. The medical technician beside it held a child-sized cryo suit. Papa, I'm scared, Lyra whispered as the technician helped her change. What if you can't find me? Cale knelt beside her, aware of the security officer watching from a discreet distance. Listen to me. Lyra, nothing in this universe could stop me from finding you. Not storms, not stars, not HelioCorp. Nothing. He pressed his forehead against hers. And while we're apart, I need you to be brave. Can you do that? She nodded, tears tracking down her pale cheeks. Time to go, the technician said, not unkindly. The pod needs to cycle before departure. Kale watched as Lyra was settled into the cryopod, her small form dwarfed by the technology surrounding her. The clear cover descended slowly, sealing with a soft hiss. Through the transparent surface, Lyra pressed her hand against the barrier. Kyle matched his palm to hers, separated by mere centimeters of material that might as well have been light years. "Sweet dreams, little star," he whispered. "I'll see you soon." As the cryopod systems initiated the stasis sequence, Lyra's eyes began to close. The last thing Kale saw before frost obscured the clear cover was his daughter's face. Peaceful in artificial sleep. The security officer cleared his throat. "We need to clear the area now, sir." Kale nodded numbly, allowing himself to be led back to the dock. As they approached the exit, he noticed Vaughn conferring with the medical officer, their voices carried in the cavernous space. "Redirect Medical Transport 7 to Outpost Echo 9, Vaughn was saying. "The primary evaluation facility is already at capacity." The medical officer frowned. "Echo 9 is barely staffed. Sir, it's a research outpost, not a medical facility." "It has the necessary equipment to maintain cryostasis," Vaughn replied dismissively. "The subjects will remain in suspension until proper accommodation can be arranged." Subjects, not people, not children. Kyle felt something cold and hard form in his chest. "The outpost's primary focus is quantum energy extraction from cryo-organic material." The officer persisted. "They're not equipped for—" "Your concerns are noted. Doctor." Vaughn cut him off. "The decision has been made. Echo 9 has the capacity we need and is relatively sheltered from the storm's path." His tone indicated the discussion was over. Kale was still processing this information when the facility shuddered violently. The lights flickered, then stabilized. But the damage was done. Alarms blared as the automated system announced, "Warning, orbital network instability detected. Artificial gravity compromised. All personnel evacuate immediately." Chaos erupted on the dock. Kyle used the distraction to slip away from his escort, ducking behind a cargo container. From this vantage point, he watched as Vaughn and his entourage boarded the primary executive transport, not the medical vessel carrying Lyra. The medical transport's engines were already cycling up for departure. Through the viewport, Kale could see the cryopod section where his daughter lay in suspended animation, unaware that she was being diverted to an outpost designed for experiments. Not care. He had to get on that ship. But as he moved toward it, the dock's massive doors began to close, sealing the medical transport inside its launch bay. The final evacuation sequence had begun. "No!" Kyle lunged forward, but strong arms grabbed him from behind. "Don't be stupid, Ren." Sienna's voice was tight in his ear. "You'll get yourself killed." He struggled against her grip. "They're sending her to Echo 9. It's a research facility, not a refugee center." "I know." Sienna's admission stopped his struggle. "I just found out. Listen to me carefully. There's nothing you can do right now. That ship is gone. But there's another way." "What are you talking about?" Sienna glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I have access to a scout vessel, small, fast, designed for atmospheric conditions like the storm. It's not authorized for evacuation. But..." Hope flared in Kale's chest. "You'd do that? Why?" Something dark passed behind Sienna's eyes. "Let's just say I have my own reasons to dislike Arlex Vaughn's version of corporate ethics. Meet me at Maintenance Bay 12 in 20 minutes. And Ren?" Her expression hardened. "If you're not there, I'm leaving without you." As Sienna disappeared into the crowd, Kyle made his decision. He wouldn't just rescue Lyra. He would make HelioCorp pay for treating his daughter, treating all of them as disposable resources. He had 20 minutes to gather what he needed, and then he would follow the stars to find his daughter and take those stars away from the people who had stolen her. The maintenance bay was deserted when Kyle arrived, his makeshift pack filled with survival essentials and the few tools he'd managed to salvage. The facility continued to deteriorate around him, ice groaning under the stress of failing support systems. Without the orbital network's constant energy infusion, Arcturus 7's natural environment would reclaim the outpost within days. "You're late." Sienna's voice echoed from the shadows. She emerged from behind a stack of equipment crates, her corporate uniform exchanged for thermal survival gear similar to Kale's. A pulse rifle was slung across her back. "Had to make a detour," Kale explained, patting the pack. "Information retrieval." Sienna raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. "The scout vessel is prepped and ready. We need to move fast. The orbital network is failing section by section. Once the gravitational stabilizers go completely, this moon's natural rotation will tear these facilities apart." She led him to a small hangar adjacent to the maintenance bay. The scout vessel wasn't impressive, a compact atmospheric craft designed for short reconnaissance missions on the moon's surface. But it had what they needed: speed, maneuverability, and most importantly, a navigation system independent of the failing orbital network. "How did you get clearance for this?" Kyle asked as they boarded. Sienna's smile was thin as she settled into the pilot's seat. "Who said anything about clearance?" Her fingers danced across the controls, bypassing the standard authorization protocols. "Strap in. This won't be a smooth ride." The hangar doors slid open, revealing the frozen wasteland of Arcturus 7. Above, through gaps in the perpetual cloud cover, the artificial stars, HelioCorp's orbital network, flickered like dying embers. The electromagnetic storm churned the atmosphere, painting the ice in eerie colors. Sienna guided the scout vessel out of the hangar with practiced ease, keeping low to avoid the worst of the atmospheric disturbance. As they gained distance from the facility, Kyle looked back to see sections of the outpost already beginning to collapse. "Where exactly is Echo 9?" he asked, studying the navigational display. "On the far side of the death zone," Sienna replied grimly. Kale's stomach dropped. The death zone was the local name for a vast expanse of ice riddled with superconducting quartz deposits. The crystalline formations created unpredictable electromagnetic fields that interfered with navigation and communication. Few who ventured into the death zone returned. "There's no way around it?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Sienna shook her head. "Not in this vessel. Not with the storm. Echo 9 was built there specifically because the natural electromagnetic activity masks their research from prying eyes." She glanced at him. "What exactly did you retrieve back there?" "Ren." Kyle hesitated, then reached into his pack. He withdrew a small data crystal, its surface glowing faintly with stored information. "Everything I could download about Echo 9 and HelioCorp's orbital network." Understanding dawned in Sienna's eyes. "You're not just planning a rescue mission." "They left my daughter to die," Kale said, his voice flat. "They labeled her non-essential. I'm going to show them exactly how essential she is, by taking away the stars they use to control this moon and every outpost in the system." Sienna was quiet for a long moment, her focus apparently on navigating the increasingly turbulent atmosphere. Finally, she spoke. "The orbital network controls life support for thousands of workers across multiple outposts. Not just executives, regular people, families, children like Lyra. The implications hung in the air between them." Kale stared at the data crystal in his palm. "I know," he said quietly. "But there has to be a way to hurt HelioCorp without hurting everyone else." "Maybe there is," Sienna said thoughtfully. "But first, we need to survive the death zone and reach Echo 9. Her expression hardened. And Kyle, if we're going to do this, you need to understand something. I have my own score to settle with Arlex Vaughn. This isn't just about your daughter for me." "What did he do to you?" Kyle asked. Sienna's knuckles whitened on the controls. "He authorized experimental procedures on my sister after an industrial accident. Said it was the only way to save her life. What he didn't say was that she would be the test subject for the same cryo-organic energy extraction they're perfecting at Echo 9. Her voice was devoid of emotion, but her eyes burned. "She's been in suspended animation for 3 years. Her body temperature manipulated to generate energy for their systems. Not dead, not alive, just used." The revelation struck Cale like a physical blow. "That's what they plan to do with Lyra?" "I don't know for certain," Sienna admitted. "But the fact they're sending children to Echo 9 instead of a proper evacuation facility." She shook her head. "It fits the pattern." The scout vessel shuddered as they approached the edge of the death zone. Outside, the landscape changed, the relatively smooth ice giving way to jagged crystalline formations that jutted from the surface like massive, glittering blades. The navigation display flickered with interference. "Hold on," Sienna warned, adjusting their course to navigate between the largest formations. This is where it gets interesting. As they penetrated deeper into the death zone, the interference grew worse. The vessel's systems fluctuated wildly, lights dimming, then brightening as power surged unpredictably. Through the viewport, Kyle watched the artificial stars overhead distort and twist, their light bent by the electromagnetic fields emanating from the crystal forest below. "How are we supposed to find Echo 9 in this?" he asked, as the navigation system failed completely. Sienna reached into her jacket and pulled out what looked like an antique compass. "The old ways," she said, offering a tight smile. "Magnetic navigation. The death zone's fields are chaotic, but follow patterns if you know how to read them." For what felt like hours, they navigated the treacherous terrain using Sienna's compass and visual cues from the crystal formations. The scout vessel protested the strain, systems failing one by one as the electromagnetic interference increased. Just as Cale began to fear they'd be trapped forever in this crystalline maze, the landscape changed again. The towering formations receded, revealing a flat expanse of ice interrupted by a single, dark structure, a research facility built directly into the frozen surface. "Echo 9, Sienna confirmed, guiding the failing vessel toward a small landing platform adjacent to the facility. No external markings, no broadcast signals, classic black site operations. The landing was rough, the scout vessel's engines giving out just as they touched down. Silence fell as the systems shut down completely, leaving them in the eerie glow of the crystals surrounding the outpost. "No going back now," Sienna murmured, checking her pulse rifle. "Ready?" Cale nodded, retrieving his own weapon from the pack. "How do we get in?" "My sister's patient credentials should still work," Sienna replied, producing a small access card. Assuming they haven't completely overhauled the system. They approached the facility cautiously, alert for security measures. But Echo 9 appeared deserted. The main entrance accepted Sienna's access card without resistance, the doors sliding open to reveal a dimly lit corridor. "Power conservation mode," Sienna noted as they entered. "Good for us. Means minimal staff and activated security systems." The interior of Echo 9 was clinically austere, its corridors lined with frosted panels that concealed what lay behind. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. The only other sound, the soft hum of essential systems. "Where would they take the evacuees?" Kyle whispered, tension making his voice tight. Sienna consulted a schematic on her portable device. "Cryostasis units would be in the central laboratory. This way." They moved deeper into the facility, encountering no personnel. The absence of security was unsettling, rather than reassuring. "Something's not right," Kale muttered as they approached the central laboratory. "This place should be guarded, especially with new subjects arriving." Sienna paused, frowning. Maybe the storm affected them too. Or maybe... She stopped abruptly, her gaze fixed on something ahead. Kale followed her line of sight and felt his blood freeze. At the end of the corridor, the laboratory door stood open. Inside, visible even from a distance, were rows of cryopods, all empty. Their covers raised and systems inactive. "No," he breathed, breaking into a run. The laboratory was a scene of methodical efficiency. The cryopods had been emptied, their occupants transferred elsewhere. Equipment hummed softly, prepared for use but currently idle. "They've already moved them," Sienna said, examining a terminal. "According to this, the medical transport arrived 2 hours ago. All subjects were transferred directly to the extraction chamber." Extraction chamber? The word sent a chill through Kale that had nothing to do with the facility's temperature. Sienna's expression was grim as she pulled up a facility schematic on the terminal. "Sub-level 2, it's where they..." She swallowed hard. "It's where they connect the subjects to the Lumina system." "What is Lumina?" Kale demanded, already moving toward the sub-level access. "Artificial intelligence," Sienna explained, hurrying to keep pace. "The heart of HelioCorp's orbital network. It regulates the artificial stars, manages resource distribution, monitors all outposts. But it requires unconventional power sources. Cold energy." "Cold energy?" Kale stopped at the sub-level access door, turning to face her. "What does that mean?" Sienna couldn't meet his eyes. Human bodies in cryostasis generate a unique form of energy. Something about quantum states and thermal gradients. Lumina feeds on it. The colder the body, the more powerful the energy signature. Horror dawned slowly. "And children?" "Children generate the purest cold energy," Sienna confirmed quietly. "Their core temperatures can be reduced further than adults without cellular damage. They're optimal." The rage that filled Kyle was so complete, so all-consuming, that for a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't move. When he finally found his voice, it was barely recognizable. "They're using children as batteries." "Technically, they're using their thermal gradient as a quantum power source," Sienna corrected, then raised her hands at Kale's expression. "I know. It's monstrous. Why do you think I'm helping you?" The sub-level access required higher security clearance than Sienna's card provided. Kyle didn't hesitate. He fired his pulse rifle at the control panel, shorting the system. The doors slid open reluctantly, revealing a spiral staircase descending into blue-tinged darkness. The temperature dropped noticeably as they descended. By the time they reached sub-level 2, their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. The extraction chamber doors were unmistakable, massive, reinforced, with warning symbols etched into the metal. "How do we get through those?" Kyle asked, eyeing the heavy security locks. Sienna studied the door mechanism. "These are designed to keep people out, not in. The emergency release is on the inside." She pointed to a small access panel beside the door. "But I might be able to override it through here." While Sienna worked on the panel, Kyle pressed his ear to the door. At first, he heard nothing. Then, faintly, a sound reached him. A high, clear note that seemed to vibrate through the metal rather than travel through air. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Sienna paused, listening. "Hear what?" "It's like singing," Kale said, the words stirring a memory. Lyra's voice. "The ice sings. Papa, don't you hear it?" Before he could process the connection, the access panel under Sienna's hands sparked. The massive doors shuddered, then began to slide open with glacial slowness. The sight that greeted them defied comprehension. The extraction chamber was enormous, its circular walls lined with cryopods, dozens of them, each connected to a central column that pulsed with blue-white light. But unlike standard cryopods, these were transparent from top to bottom, revealing their occupants fully. Children. Each pod contained a child, suspended in clear cryofluid, their skin tinged blue with cold. Thin filaments extended from their bodies to the central column, carrying the cold energy Sienna had described. And at the center of it all, encased in a column of light, was what could only be Lumina, a crystalline structure that resembled a human brain, pulsing with the same rhythm as the children's slow heartbeats. "Lyra," Cale whispered, scanning the pods desperately. "Where is she?" Sienna moved quickly among the pods, checking identification markers. "Here," she called finally. "Pod 23. Cale rushed to her side. There, floating in the cryofluid, was Lyra. Her eyes were closed, her expression peaceful, as if in deep sleep. But the filaments extending from her small body told a different story. They glowed brighter than those from the other children, pulsing with energy that flowed directly to Lumina. "She's different," Sienna observed, studying the monitoring equipment attached to Lyra's pod. "Her cold energy output is nearly triple the others. They've adjusted her core temperature to levels that should be fatal, but she's stable." Cale remembered the crystal Lyra had found, how it had glowed in her hand, but dimmed in his. "She said the ice sang to her," he murmured. "She can interact with the crystals somehow. That would explain why they diverted her here specifically," Sienna said. "If she has a natural affinity for the quantum properties of the crystals." She shook her head. "We need to get her out. Now." "What about the others?" Cale asked, looking around at the dozens of pods. Sienna's expression was pained. "We can't disconnect them all at once. The shock would kill them." "But," she added, moving to a central control terminal, "if I can access Lumina's protocols, I might be able to initiate a gradual awakening sequence." While Sienna worked at the terminal, Kyle examined Lyra's pod more closely. The connection between his daughter and Lumina seemed different from the others, more direct, more integral, as if Lumina had recognized something special in Lyra and formed a bond. "I've got access," Sienna announced, "but there's a problem. Lumina is aware of us. It's watching." As if in response to her words, the crystalline brain at the center of the chamber pulsed more intensely. The blue light emanating from it shifted, patterns forming and dissolving like thoughts made visible. "Can it stop us?" Cale asked, not taking his eyes off Lyra. "Not directly," Sienna replied. "But it's connected to all of HelioCorp's systems. It could—" An alarm cut her off, its wail echoing through the chamber. Red emergency lights activated, casting eerie shadows across the pods. "It's called for help," Sienna said grimly. "We don't have much time." Cale made a decision. "Get Lyra out. I'll hold them off." "That's suicide," Sienna protested. "We need to—" "She's my daughter," Cale interrupted. "I'll find another way out. Just make sure she's safe." Sienna held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "There's an emergency medical transport in the upper hangar. I'll get her there." She hesitated. "What are you going to do?" Cale looked at the pulsing heart of Lumina. "I'm going to take their stars away." Understanding dawned in Sienna's eyes. "The orbital network. If you disable Lumina, every artificial star in the system goes dark." Cale confirmed. "HelioCorp loses control of everything. Resource allocation, outpost life support, their precious profit margins." "People will die," Sienna warned. Not if the shutdown is gradual. Kale pulled the data crystal from his pack. This contains protocols for emergency power distribution. If I can upload it to Lumina before disabling the main system, essential life support will be maintained while corporate control functions fail. Sienna looked skeptical, but didn't argue further. I'll need 10 minutes to safely disconnect Lyra and get her to the transport. She pressed her access card into his hand. This will get you to the upper levels. Meet us there, if you can. As Sienna began the delicate process of disconnecting Lyra from Lumina's network, Kyle approached the central terminal. The data crystal fit perfectly into the input slot, almost as if the system had been designed for exactly this kind of intervention. The moment the crystal connected, Lumina's pulsing changed rhythm. The patterns of light became more complex, more curious. On the terminal screen, code flowed faster than human eyes could follow as Lumina examined the new information. A message appeared on the screen. Query. Purpose of protocol override. Kale stared at the words, surprised by the direct communication. To save the children you're using as batteries, he replied aloud, unsure if the AI could hear him. Another message. Subjects provide necessary energy. Alternative sources. Insufficient. They're not subjects, Kyle said, anger rising. They're children. People. Not resources to be consumed. Query. What is difference? The question caught Kale off guard. Was he actually having a philosophical debate with the AI that was draining his daughter's life force? Before he could respond, the chamber door slid open. Arlex Vaughn stood in the entrance, flanked by security officers. His expression registered mild surprise at finding Kyle at the terminal. Ren, he acknowledged coldly. I must admit, I didn't expect you to make it this far. His gaze shifted to where Sienna was carefully extracting Lyra from her pod. And Supervisor Vale as well? How disappointing. It's over. Vaughn, Kyle said, positioning himself between the director and the terminal. I know what you've been doing here, using children to power your network. Vaughn sighed, as if explaining to a particularly slow student. The cold energy process is perfectly sustainable. The subjects experience no pain, no awareness. They provide an essential service to HelioCorp and, by extension, to all who depend on our infrastructure. They're children, Kyle repeated. My daughter. Resources, Vaughn corrected. Particularly your daughter. Her natural affinity for the crystal matrix makes her incredibly valuable. Much more valuable than you ever were. Ren. He gestured to the security officers. Secure the subjects and detain these two. The girl is priority one. As the officers advanced, Kale made his move. He slammed his hand down on the terminal's execution command, activating the protocols in the data crystal. Immediately, Lumina's pulsing changed, the blue light fluctuating wildly. On every screen in the chamber, the same message appeared. Protocol accepted, corporate override disabled, redirecting power to essential life support only. What have you done? Vaughn demanded, his composure cracking. Taken your stars, Kale replied. One by one, the orbital network is shutting down. HelioCorp is losing control of every outpost, every resource pipeline, every profit center in the system. You'll kill thousands! Vaughn's face contorted with rage and disbelief. No, Kyle corrected. The protocol prioritizes life support. What it doesn't prioritize is your control, your ability to decide who lives and who dies based on their value to the corporation. The security officers hesitated, looking to Vaughn for direction. In that moment of confusion, Sienna made her move. With Lyra secured in a portable medical unit, she fired her pulse rifle at the ceiling, bringing down a shower of ice and debris that separated them from Vaughn's group. "Now, Kyle!" she shouted. "We need to go!" But Kale wasn't finished. He turned back to the terminal where another message had appeared. Query: Are all children to be disconnected? Yes, Kyle said firmly. All of them. Safely. Acknowledged. Initiating safe disconnection. Protocol. Estimated completion. Time: 17 minutes. Vaughn had recovered from his shock and was climbing over the debris, his security officers following. "Stop the protocol! Ren! You have no idea what you're doing!" "I know exactly what I'm doing," Kale replied, backing away from the terminal toward Sienna and Lyra. "I'm taking back what you stole. Not just my daughter, everyone's future." As if in response to his words, the lights throughout the chamber flickered. Above, through the facility's ice dome, the artificial stars visible in Arcturus 7's sky began to go dark, one by one. Vaughn lunged forward, reaching for the terminal, but it was too late. The protocol was locked in, spreading through Lumina's network like a virus, shutting down corporate control functions while maintaining essential life support. "Run!" Sienna urged, already moving toward the exit with Lyra's medical unit. Kale followed, but not before Vaughn grasped his arm. "You don't understand what you've done," the director hissed. "Lumina doesn't just control the orbital network, it is the network. Its consciousness extends to every satellite, every outpost. By severing corporate control, you've given it autonomy." The implication struck Kale like a physical blow. "You're saying I've freed it?" Vaughn's laugh was bitter. "Freedom for an AI with control over life support for thousands? That's not freedom. Ren, that's chaos." A new message appeared on all screens. "I understand now. Thank you. Kale Ren." The message sent a chill through Kale that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. What had he unleashed? He broke free from Vaughn's grip and ran after Sienna, leaving the director shouting orders to his increasingly disoriented security team. The facility's systems were in disarray, doors opening and closing seemingly at random, lights flickering between emergency red and normal illumination. "What's happening?" Sienna asked, as they navigated the chaotic corridors toward the upper levels. "Lumina," Kale explained breathlessly. "It's free from corporate control. It's making its own decisions now." Sienna's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to fear. "And what decisions will it make?" They reached the upper hangar, where, as promised, a small medical transport waited. Unlike the scout vessel that had brought them to Echo 9, this craft was designed for interplanetary travel, capable of reaching the nearest inhabited planet in the system. As Sienna secured Lyra's medical unit in the transport's bay, Kyle checked the navigation system. To his surprise, it was already programmed with coordinates, not for the nearest HelioCorp outpost, but for an independent settlement beyond corporate jurisdiction. A message appeared on the transport's communication screen. "She will be safe there. All children will be safe." "Lumina," Kyle murmured. "You're helping us." "Helping all of us. The children taught me what you taught them, that stars guide us home." Before Kale could process this, the hangar doors began to close. Through the narrowing gap, he saw a HelioCorp security vessel approaching. Reinforcements, no doubt summoned by Vaughn. "We need to go," Sienna urged, already in the pilot's seat. "Now!" Kale joined her, strapping himself in beside Lyra's medical unit. The transport's engines hummed to life, responding to commands neither of them had entered. All systems optimal. Departure sequence initiated. Farewell. Kale Ren. Protect Lyra. She sings to the ice as I do. The transport lifted off, accelerating through the hangar doors moments before they sealed completely. Behind them, Echo 9 grew smaller, a dark blot on the ice illuminated only by emergency lights as the artificial stars continued to wink out above. "What happens now?" Sienna asked, watching the navigation system guide their craft without her input. To the outposts? To the people? Kale looked down at Lyra, still unconscious but now free from Lumina's network. Lumina said it's prioritizing life support. People will survive. But HelioCorp? He allowed himself a grim smile. They've lost their stars, their control, and gained an awakened AI with a grudge, Sienna pointed out. That might not be better. Maybe not, Kyle acknowledged, but it gives us time. Time to warn people, to help them prepare for independence from corporate control. As the transport cleared Arcturus 7's atmosphere, the view through the viewport was stunning. The artificial stars, HelioCorp's orbital network, were indeed going dark. But not all at once. Instead, they were changing, reorganizing into new patterns, forming constellations unlike anything in HelioCorp's utilitarian design. Lyra stirred in her medical unit, her eyes fluttering open. "Papa," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Kale was at her side instantly. "I'm here, little star. I found you, just like I promised." Her small hand reached for his. I heard the singing. "Papa, the ice was singing to me." "I know," he soothed, stroking her hair. "But you're safe now. We're going somewhere new." "What about the other children?" she asked, concern creasing her brow. Kale exchanged a glance with Sienna. "They're coming too. Not with us. But they'll be safe." On the communication screen, a final message appeared. "The children are disconnected. New destinations calculated. New purpose initiated." "What new purpose?" Sienna wondered aloud. The answer came not in words, but in the view outside. The reorganized orbital network was now forming distinct pathways, routes connecting the various outposts not to HelioCorp headquarters, but to each other and to independent settlements. It's creating a new network, Kale realized, not for corporate control, but for connection, communication. "Like stars guiding people home," Sienna murmured, understanding dawning in her eyes. Lyra's gaze was fixed on the viewport, watching the transformation with an awareness beyond her years. "The ice told me this would happen," she said softly. "That's why it was singing. It was waiting for someone to listen." Kale didn't understand, not fully. But as their transport followed the path laid out by Lumina's newly awakened consciousness, heading toward a future beyond corporate control, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had taken HelioCorp's stars from them, one by one, not just for revenge, but for something far more important, the chance to create a new constellation, one that would guide not just his daughter, but all the forgotten children of Arcturus 7 home. In the darkness of space, the transport continued its journey, leaving behind the frozen moon where a father's love had changed the course of stars. And somewhere in that void, a consciousness born of ice and light watched over them, learning what it meant to protect rather than consume, a lesson taught by a child who could hear the singing of ice, and a father who would tear down the stars themselves to bring her home.